Good evening, everyone. I'm going to call the November 7th of 2019 Muscatine City Council meeting to order. Krista, will you please do the roll call?
Councilmember Spread,
Present.
Harvey,
Present.
Brockert,
Present.
Saucedos,
Present.
Brackett,
Present.
Fitzgerald,
Here.
Malcolm,
Present.
7 present, 0 absent, Your Honor.
Thank you. Will you please join me in saying the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everyone, for coming tonight. I'd like to start tonight's agenda by asking if there's anyone here who would like to speak to council about something that's not already on tonight's agenda. If so, please come to the podium. Hearing nothing, we'll go ahead and continue on to the consent agenda. I'm sorry, go ahead. No hurry. Please state your name and address.
My name is Max Kaufman, 1609 Foster Street, Muscatine. I'd like to address your agenda item 11C. It has to do with the Love's gas station.
Mr. Kaufman, actually, the process is when we get to that item, there's a time for discussion about that item.
Very good, ma'am.
Sorry to have you walk up there. We'll go ahead and continue on. We're on number 5 on tonight's agenda, and the following items are considered to be routine by the City Council and will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless a council member so requests, in which event it will be removed from the consent agenda and considered in its normal sequence on the agenda. Do I have a motion to approve tonight's consent agenda, which includes items 6A, items 8A through D, item 9A, items 12A through F, and tonight's bills totaling $8,938,331.37.
So moved, Your Honor.
Second, I have a motion by Councilman Fitzgerald with a second by Councilman Saucedo. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries. We're going to continue on down. We do have one public hearing tonight, and it concerns the Urban Renewal Plan Amendment. This amendment will update the description of the downtown street improvements and facilitate the undertaking of the new urban renewal projects in the urban renewal area, consisting of Musco sports lighting, tax increment financing, and the use of the tax increment financing funds to fund small business forgivable loans in blighted areas for code appliance. Now is the time for the public to comment. Hearing nothing, do I have a motion to close this public hearing?
So moved.
Second?
Second, Your Honor.
We have a motion by Councilman Brackett with a second by Councilwoman Brockert. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion carries. We're moving down to item 9A. I have a proclamation tonight to share. Whereas the government of Muscatine, Iowa celebrates our small businesses and the contributions they make to our local economy and community. According to the United States Small Business Administration, there are 30.7 small businesses in the United States. They represent 99.7% of all firms with paid employees in the United States and are responsible for 64.9% of net new jobs created from 2000 to 2018. And whereas small businesses employ 47.3% of the employees in the private sector in the United States, and whereas 94% of consumers in the United States value the contributions small businesses make in their community. And whereas 96% of consumers who plan to shop on Small Business Saturday said the day inspires them to go to small, independently owned retailers or restaurants that they had not been to before or would not have otherwise tried. And whereas 92% of companies planning promotions on Small Business Saturday said that the day helps their business stand out during the busy holiday shopping season. And whereas 59% of small business owners said that Small Business Saturday contributes significantly to their holiday sales each year. And whereas Muscatine supports local businesses that create jobs, boost our local economy, and preserve our communities. And whereas advocacy groups, as well as public and private organizations across the country, have endorsed the Saturday after Thanksgiving as Small Business Saturday. Now therefore I, Diana Broderson, Mayor of Muscatine, Iowa, do hereby proclaim November 30th of 2019 as Small Business Saturday. And I urge the residents of our community and communities near us and across the country to support small businesses and merchants on Small Business Saturday and throughout the year. We are going to continue on, and we are now on 11A on the agenda. I have presented for City Council's consideration a resolution to approve the Urban Renewal Plan Amendment for the Consolidated Muscatine Urban Renewal Area, which is being amended for the purposes of, number one, updating the description of the Downtown Street Improvement Project, and number two, identifying new urban renewal projects to be undertaken therein. Do I have a motion to accept this resolution as submitted?
So moved, Your Honor.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? Hearing none, Councilman Spread, how do you vote?
Aye.
Councilman Harvey?
Aye.
Councilwoman Brockert?
Aye.
Councilman Saucedo? Councilman Malcolm?
Aye.
Councilman Fitzgerald?
Aye.
And Councilman Brackett.
Aye.
This resolution is adopted with all ayes. We're on 11B, and I have presented for City Council's consideration a resolution setting a public hearing on the proposed development agreement with Musco Sports Lighting, including annual appropriation tax increment payments. This public hearing will be held on November 21st of this year at 7 p.m. here in the chambers. Do I have a motion to adopt the resolution as submitted?
So moved, Your Honor.
Do I have a second?
Second.
We have a motion by Councilman Brackett with a second by Councilman Malcolm. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, Councilwoman Brockert, how do you vote?
Aye.
Councilman Spread?
Aye.
Councilman Harvey?
Aye.
Councilman Malcolm?
Aye.
Councilman Fitzgerald?
Aye.
Councilman Saucedo?
Aye.
And Councilman Brackett.
Aye.
This resolution is adopted with all ayes. 11C. We have tonight presented for City Council's consideration a resolution setting a public hearing on the proposed zoning change in the city of Muscatine. The Planning and Zoning Commission has received a request to rezone 32.78 acres at the southeast corner of US 61 and Mittman Road from agricultural to light industrial commercial. This public hearing will be held on November 21st of 2019 at 7 p.m. at City Hall Council Chambers. Do I have a motion to adopt the resolution as submitted?
So moved. Second, Your Honor.
We have a motion by Councilman Fitzgerald with a second by Councilman Brackett. Is there any discussion? Mr. Kaufman, now would be the time.
The fuel distributor that's in question here has made it public knowledge that they do not fly the American flag above any of their fuel outlets anywhere in our nation because they find that it may offend someone or somebody that may stop into their stations, primarily truck drivers. I know this because I'd heard it to begin with, and I found that I couldn't believe it, so I stopped into one of their stations along the freeway, and I asked the manager, and he confirmed it. As an American veteran, I find it offensive to me that they refuse to fly an American flag above their station. And I also, as a citizen of Muscatine, find it offensive that we are going to give up our ground to them, rezone our land to them, and probably give up TIF grants to them. And with the exception of one of your council here who is a veteran, I urge you non-veterans who sat on the council to vote accordingly with the veterans of America to stop this Love's Gas Group from coming in because of their policy against the American flag that I so proudly fought for. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Kaufman.
There's a lady back in the back.
I'm sorry, please come to the front. Go ahead, Mr. Kaufman. Please state your name and address.
My name's Annette Losey, and I live at 2603 Mittman Road. And I've been a resident of Mittman Road for my entire life. And so this is a very, what should I say? It's a hard subject to think of a truck stop, 24 hours, 7 day a week, 365 day a year truck stop, going to be on this side of the bypass on a residential neighborhood. And it's going to hold 50 trucks plus accommodate cars and maintenance and things like that. So please be aware, it's not just a little gas station. It's open all the time. And I just have something that I really wanted to read. There are many of us residents with serious concerns and reservations regarding the proposed rezoning and construction of a truck stop at the intersection of Mittman Road and the bypass. We would like to strongly urge you to do your due diligence in ensuring that this is truly in the best interests of the whole community before you allow it to go through. You need to look beyond bringing in just any business at any cost. We would suggest if you haven't already, or if you haven't already been past the Loves, I don't know how many of you have been there, but my sister and I did go by one of the Loves travel stops located in Davenport off the interstate on Northwest Boulevard. Please consider how business such as this will affect Muscatine, the other businesses in and around town, those traveling on the bypass, and especially those who will be living with it in their neighborhood. There are many issues to take into consideration here, and many for which the wrong decision may be hard or impossible to take back. Please give ample weight to the safety and well-being of the people. If you do what is right, prosperity will come. I thank you so much for your time, and just please consider all the points involved with this big construction project. I spoke with the gentleman at Love's, and very nice gentleman, Alex Fuller, but I asked him, do you have a plan B for this? And he says, well, we're sort of plan B, because he didn't want this parcel. He wanted to be closer to the corner of the industrial connector, and I can see why he would. If you look at your, well, the diagrams aren't here, but he couldn't get the frontage for them to give him access to the ground that he did want. So I don't think putting it on a residential road where it's mostly homes and that would be the best place for a truck stop. So thank you again for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Losey. We appreciate you coming down.
Any questions of me, or probably not at this time?
Well, actually, tonight, the process is that we are just voting to set the public hearing for November 21st to rezone. So we're a ways out before any decision is made as far as that goes.
Okay.
Tonight is setting the public hearing. Did you have something?
Oh, I was just, that was what I was gonna say as
Okay.
well, and that the public hearing would be an important meeting to attend if you have opinions for, against, or whatever on that project. So,
Okay, Okay, well, thank you so much again
Thank
for your
you.
time. We just wanted to get this in your
Certainly.
mind. There's pros and cons, definitely, to the.
We appreciate that.
24 hours, 7 day a week, 365 day a year truck stop. Thank you.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, Councilman Brackett, how do you vote?
Aye.
Councilman Malcolm?
In solidarity with Mr. Kaufman, I'm going to say nay.
Councilman Fitzgerald?
Aye.
Councilman Saucedo?
Aye.
Councilwoman Brockert?
Aye.
Councilman Spread?
Aye.
And Councilman Harvey.
Aye.
The resolution is adopted with 6 ayes and 1 nay.
I do want to make one comment on this. Andrew, did they do a traffic study or a committee? Are they going to have any evaluations on that when we start getting closer to the November 21st?
Mayor, Council, they are currently conducting a traffic impact study that's being required by the Iowa Department of Transportation as they will be accessing Highway 61. Basically, is from that study, will tell them what improvements they need to make in order to make that function safely there, and then they will be responsible for picking up the tab to do that.
So we'll have that before the 21st?
That I don't know.
Okay.
Their representative will be here on the 21st, so, you know, he'll be able to field those questions, because they're the one responsible for paying for and doing that study. So we will obviously have the results on that.
Thank you. That's all I have, Your Honor.
Thank you, Andrew. We're going to move on to 11D. We have presented for City Council's consideration a resolution setting a public hearing on the Second Street Streetscape Project, also for November 21 of this year at 7 p.m. here in the chambers. Do I have a resolution, a motion to adopt the resolution as submitted?
So moved, Your Honor.
Second.
Second, Your Honor.
I have a motion by Councilman Brackett with a second by Councilwoman Brockert. Is there any discussion?
I just would like to add in that, as with any public hearing, I'll always vote for that to move forward because it's a chance for the public to interact regardless of the project.
Thank you. Councilwoman Brockert, how do you vote?
Aye.
Councilman Harvey?
Aye.
Councilman Spread?
Aye.
Councilman Saucedo?
Aye.
Councilman Malcolm?
Aye.
Councilman Fitzgerald?
Aye.
And Councilman Brackett.
Aye.
The resolution is adopted. 11E, we have several resolutions tonight for 8 development agreements for fiscal year 2021, and I will just go through them one at a time. First, we have a resolution approving obligation of funds from the Urban Renewal Tax Increment Revenue Fund for appropriation to the payment of annual appropriation tax increment financed obligations, which shall come due in the next succeeding year for Harrison Lofts. Do I have a motion to adopt the resolution as submitted?
So moved.
Second.
Second, Your Honor.
I have a motion by Councilman Fitzgerald with a second by Councilman Brackett. Any discussion?
That's
Hearing,
Councilman
sorry, go
Spread.
ahed.
That was Councilman Spread.
Oh,
It was-
He might have been to it.
Did you I didn't hear him. Okay. Councilman Spread. Krista. Councilman Spread seconded it. Councilman Spread, how do you vote?
Aye.
Councilman Harvey.
Aye.
Councilwoman Brockert.
Aye.
Councilman Saucedo.
Aye.
Councilman Malcolm.
Aye.
Councilman Fitzgerald.
Aye.
And Councilman Brackett.
Aye.
The resolution is adopted. Number 2, we have a resolution approving the obligation of funds from the Urban Renewal Tax Increment Revenue Fund for the appropriation to the payment of annual appropriation tax increment financed obligations, which shall come due in the next succeeding year for Hines. Do I have a motion to adopt the resolution as submitted?
So moved.
Second.
Second, Your Honor.
We have a motion by Councilman Saucedo with a second by Councilwoman Brockert. Any discussion? Hearing none. Councilman Brackett, how do you vote?
Aye.
Councilman Fitzgerald?
Aye.
Councilman Malcolm?
Aye.
Councilman Saucedo?
Aye.
Councilman Spread?
Aye.
Councilwoman Brockert?
Aye.
Councilman Harvey?
Aye.
The resolution is adopted with all ayes. Number 3 is a resolution approving the obligation of funds from the Urban Renewal Tax Increment Revenue Fund for the appropriation to the payment of annual appropriation tax increment financed obligations, which shall come due in the next succeeding year for HNI Corporation. Do I have a motion to adopt this resolution?
So moved. Second, Your Honor.
We have a motion by Councilman Fitzgerald with the second by Councilman Brackett. Any discussion? Hearing none. Councilman Spread, how do you vote?
Aye.
Councilman Harvey?
Aye.
Councilwoman Brockert?
Aye.
Councilman Saucedo?
Aye.
Councilman Malcolm?
Aye.
Councilman Fitzgerald?
Aye.
Councilman Brackett?
Aye.
The resolution is adopted with all ayes. Number 4 is a resolution approving the obligation of funds from the Urban Renewal Tax Increment Revenue Fund for the appropriation to the payment of annual appropriation tax increment financed obligations which shall come due in the next succeeding year for the Riverview Hotel development. Do I have a motion to adopt this resolution?
So moved.
Councilman Spread, Councilman Malcolm, or Councilman Fitzgerald, will you second?
I'll second it. Doesn't matter.
I got it. Any discussion? Hearing none. Councilman Spread, how do you vote?
Aye.
Councilman Harvey?
Aye.
Councilwoman Brockert?
Aye.
Councilman Saucedo?
Aye.
Councilman Malcolm?
Aye.
Councilman Fitzgerald?
Aye.
Councilman Brackett?
Aye.
The resolution is adopted. Number 5 is also a resolution approving the obligation of funds from the Urban Renewal Tax Increment Revenue Fund for the appropriation to the payment of annual appropriation tax increment financed obligations which shall come due in the next succeeding year for Union Tank Car Company. Do I have a motion to adopt this resolution?
So moved, Your Honor.
Second.
Second.
We have a motion by Councilman Brackett with a second by Councilman Harvey. Any discussion?
I had one question in regards to this. I think
Go
we
ahead.
talked about this in budget. It was just, what did they do? And did we have any knowledge of what they did? Because I don't believe we had any inspections on this. So if I could get that information, maybe follow it up with somebody.
I can probably respond to that now.
Okay.
This was part of their application for high-quality jobs a few years back. So it's an economic development item, and a lot of it was, if I recall right, was related to the high-quality jobs they were adding.
Okay,
Thank you, Nancy.
that's all I have.
Okay, thanks. Hearing nothing else, Councilman Brackett, how do you vote?
Aye.
Councilman Malcolm?
Aye.
Councilman Fitzgerald?
Aye.
Councilwoman Brockert?
Aye.
Councilman Harvey?
Aye.
Councilman Spread?
Aye.
Councilman Saucedo?
Aye.
The resolution is adopted. Number 6, we have a resolution approving the obligation of funds for the Urban Renewal Tax Increment Revenue Fund for the appropriation to the payment of annual appropriation tax increment financed obligations which shall come due in the next succeeding year for Wallview Developments Limited, and this is for project number 1. Do I have a motion to adopt the resolution?
So moved, Your Honor.
Second.
Second.
We have a motion by Councilman Fitzgerald with a second by Councilman Spread. Any discussion? Okay. It was Councilman Brackett and Councilman Spread. Any discussion? Hearing none. Councilman Spread, how do you vote?
Aye.
Councilman Harvey?
Aye.
Councilwoman Brockert?
Aye.
Councilman Saucedo?
Aye.
Councilman Malcolm?
Aye.
Councilman Fitzgerald?
Aye.
Councilman Brackett?
Aye.
The resolution is adopted. Next, we have a resolution approving the obligation of funds from the Urban Renewal Tax Increment Revenue Fund for the appropriation to the payment of annual appropriation tax increment financed obligations which shall come due in the next succeeding year for Wallview Development, and this is for project number 2. Do I have a resolution to adopt this? A motion to adopt. Fitzgerald?
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none. Councilman Harvey, how do you vote?
Aye.
Councilman Spread?
Aye.
Councilwoman Brockert?
Aye.
Councilman Saucedo?
Aye.
Councilman Fitzgerald?
Aye.
Councilman Brackett?
Aye.
Councilman Malcolm?
Aye.
The resolution is adopted. And the last one is the resolution approving the obligation of funds from the Urban Renewal Tax Increment Revenue Fund for the appropriation to the annual payment for appropriation tax increment financed obligations which shall come due in the next succeeding year for White Distribution and Supply. Do I have a motion to adopt the resolution as submitted?
So, second, Your Honor.
Councilman Harvey and Councilman Brackett. Any discussion? Hearing none. Councilman Saucedo, how do you vote?
Aye.
Councilwoman Brockert?
Aye.
Councilman Harvey?
Aye.
Councilman Spread?
Aye.
Councilman Malcolm?
Aye.
Councilman Fitzgerald?
Aye.
And Councilman Brackett.
Aye.
The resolution is adopted with all ayes. We're on 11F, and now we have several resolutions approving 7 internal advances. And the first one is authorizing the internal advance of funds for the 1920 Urban Renewal Administration and Professional Support Program. Do I have a motion to adopt?
So moved, Your Honor.
Second.
We have a motion by Councilman Brackett with a second by Councilman Saucedo. Any discussion?
I had one question. I had a few people reach out and they were kind of confused by what this process is, and I wondered if Nancy could give just a very short explanation as to why we do this and how this is moving the funds in general because I think most of these the description should fit for this section.
Right. In order to claim tax increment financing funds, we have to have debt, and these internal advances create that debt that we can then claim TIF revenues for. So in this case, we're able to fund staff economic development related time from TIF rather than directly from property taxes. So this has helped us balance the general fund in the last probably 6 or 7 years at least that we've done this.
Okay.
And they're all, most of them are, and then some are actually for the programs, the Small Business Forgivable Loan Program, the new program for the code compliance in the blighted areas, the new one starting next fiscal year on the downtown facades. So we have to have debt. These internal advances create that debt that we need.
Okay.
Thank you, Nancy. Go ahead, Us.
Hi, Ms. Nancy, I have a question. I like answering financial questions. I'm trying to still wrap my head around, so the debt that you're claiming in your cover document that came to us said $159,000, and it was staff costs, and you listed all these different departments. So I'm not sure how is this broken down or you just compiled the time and energy and came up with a debt ceiling for all this?
That's based on our estimates of actual time for economic development purposes. And
Okay.
there's really a lot more time involved than some people realize. Even putting together all the paperwork for tonight took quite a bit of staff time. Also, working with developers for new TIFs, that type of thing. So there really is a lot of effort, time and effort of staff in economic development.
Okay, that's, of course, because I saw that amount and I'm seeing all these different department kids and I'm like, whoa, that's interesting. Okay, thank you.
Hearing nothing else, Councilman Spread, how do you vote?
Aye.
Councilman Harvey?
Aye.
Councilwoman Brockert?
Aye.
Councilman Saucedo?
Aye.
Councilman Malcolm?
Aye.
Councilman Fitzgerald?
Aye.
And Councilman Brackett.
Aye.
The resolution is adopted. The second one is a resolution authorizing the internal advance of funds and economic development grant for the Greater Muscatine Chamber of Commerce and Industry Support Program. Do I have a motion to adopt this resolution?
So moved, Your Honor.
Second.
Second, Your Honor.
We have a motion by Councilman Spread with a second by Councilman Fitzgerald. Any discussion? Hearing none. Councilman Saucedo, how do you vote?
Aye.
Councilwoman Brockert?
Aye.
Councilman Harvey?
Aye.
Councilman Spread?
Aye.
Councilman Brackett?
Aye.
Councilman Fitzgerald?
Aye.
Councilman Malcolm?
Aye.
The resolution is adopted. The third resolution authorizes the internal advance of funds for the Small Business Forgivable Loan Program. Do I have a motion to adopt this resolution?
So moved, Your Honor.
Second.
We have a motion by Councilman Fitzgerald with a second by Councilman Harvey. Any discussion? Councilman Spread, how do you vote?
Aye.
Councilman Harvey?
Aye.
Councilwoman Brockert?
Aye.
Councilman Saucedo?
Aye.
Councilman Malcolm?
Aye.
Councilman Fitzgerald?
Aye.
Councilman Brackett?
Aye.
The resolution is adopted. The fourth resolution authorizes the internal advance of funds for the Forgivable Loan Program for code compliance improvements. Do I have a motion to adopt this resolution?
So moved, Your Honor.
Second.
Second, Your Honor.
We have a motion by Councilman Brackett with a second by Councilwoman Brockert. Any discussion? Hearing none. Councilman Malcolm, how do you vote?
Aye.
Councilman Fitzgerald?
Aye.
Councilman Brackett?
Aye.
Councilman Spread?
Aye.
Councilman Harvey?
Aye.
Councilwoman Brockert?
Aye.
And Councilman Saucedo.
Aye.
This resolution is also adopted. The fifth resolution concerns authorizing the internal advance of funds for the downtown facade improvements forgivable loan program. Do I have a motion to adopt this resolution?
So moved.
Second.
Second, Your Honor.
We have a motion by Councilman Brackett with a second by Councilman Malcolm. Any discussion? Hearing none, Councilman Harvey, how do you vote?
Aye.
Councilman Spread?
Aye.
Councilman Saucedo?
Aye.
Councilwoman Brockert?
Aye.
Councilman Fitzgerald?
Aye.
Councilman Brackett?
Aye.
And Councilman Malcolm.
Aye.
This resolution is adopted. The sixth resolution authorizes the internal advance of funds for the fiscal year 2021 debt service requirements for the downtown streetscape project. Do I have a motion to adopt this resolution?
So moved.
Second, Your Honor.
We have a motion by Councilman Malcolm with a second by Councilman Brackett. Any discussion here? Hearing none. Councilman Malcolm, how do you vote?
Aye.
Councilman Fitzgerald?
Aye.
Councilman Brackett?
Aye.
Councilman Saucedo?
Aye.
Councilwoman Brockert?
Aye.
Councilman Harvey?
Aye.
And Councilman Spread.
Aye.
The resolution is adopted. And the final resolution authorizes the internal advance of funds for engineering services for the downtown streetscape project. Do I have a motion for this resolution?
So moved, Your Honor.
Second, Your
We
Honor.
have a motion by Councilman Spread with a second by Councilman Brackett. Any discussion? Hearing none. Councilman Malcolm, how do you vote?
Aye.
Councilman Saucedo?
Aye.
Councilman Fitzgerald?
Aye.
Councilwoman Brockert?
Aye.
Councilman Brackett?
Aye.
Councilman Spread?
Aye.
Councilman Harvey?
Aye.
The resolution is adopted with all ayes. And we are now on 11G, and we have presented for City Council's consideration a resolution in support of workforce housing tax credit benefit application to be submitted to the Iowa Economic Development Authority by Hershey Property for a housing project at 216 Sycamore. Is there a motion to adopt the resolution as submitted?
So moved.
Second, Your Honor.
We have a motion by Councilman Saucedo with a second by Councilman Brackett. Do we have any discussion? Hearing none. Councilman Spread, how do you vote?
Aye.
Councilman Harvey?
Aye.
Councilwoman Brockert?
Aye.
Councilman Saucedo?
Aye.
Councilman Malcolm?
Aye.
Councilman Fitzgerald?
Aye.
Councilman Brackett?
Aye.
The resolution is adopted with all ayes. We're on 11H, and we have presented for City Council's consideration a request to approve an amendment to the Grandview Avenue Reconstruction Project Design Agreement. Additional work required by the City of Muscatine and Muscatine Power and Water required the design consultant Bolton and Mink to redesign portions of the project. The design consultant now has submitted a proposed amendment totaling $82,400. Is there a motion to approve the request as submitted?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion by Councilman Fitzgerald with the second by Councilman Harvey. Is there any discussion?
I had two questions on this.
Go ahead.
So my understanding is they're going to be putting in another 16-inch water main, and are we actually replacing the sanitary sewers as well? And is that going to be done, I guess if they're replacing that, my question is where's the extra cost really come from if we're already going to excavate and demo the whole line, or demo the whole concrete anyway?
Mayor, council, I think I have to divide that question into two pieces.
Go ahead.
This extra is due to the work that was requested to be done to avoid reconstructing the 16-inch water main, to allow the 16-inch water main to stay where it's at. So that is the first thing that I want to make clear. And then the second part of that question was on the sanitary sewer. There was no intent originally to replace any of the sanitary sewers that were there. But when we were getting close to the end of the design process, the leadership of that department changed, and they decided to go out and do some additional work and some additional televising and some additional cleaning. And they found out that some portions of that sanitary sewer weren't in the greatest shape, and so that we had to ask them to add that into this process. So that's hopefully clarifies it.
So we're, okay, and that does help on the sanitary sewer portion of it. So the 16-inch water transmission line, we're not messing with. They're just covering that up? Can you use that? We're not replacing any of it, I guess is what I'm getting at?
No, we are going to leave it exactly where it is. But
Okay.
if in the original design of that, with the storm sewers the way they were, where the assumed location of that water main was, it all worked. But once it got potholed by MP&W, we found out that 16-inch water main was a little higher than where it was, and so we would have had to do little relocations of the 16-inch water main, and it's way, 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 way cheaper to redesign those storm sewers than to redo those 16-inch water mains. So that was the,
What depth is that 16-inch?
what's that?
What depth is it? 5 feet, 6 feet?
I believe that 16-inch water main is definitely less than 5 feet
Wow.
in there. That may sound like a cause for concern, but I don't really think that it is for MP&W. But there were places where it was definitely less cover than we thought it was, and were led to believe that it was.
I was just wondering because I thought that was a requirement through the new SUDAS program, a depth that we would normally run under.
True,
Correct?
true, absolutely
That's what
true.
I'm saying. If we're going to
Yeah.
be replacing it, wouldn't they have to also stay in line with that as well, too?
Yes, yes.
Okay. All right, that's all I have.
All right. Anything else?
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Hearing nothing, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The request is approved. We're on 11L. We have presented for City Council's consideration a request to approve change order number 1 for Phase B of the West Hill Sewer Separation Project. During this contract, the contractor has encountered numerous delays and requests for extra work. This is a no-cost change order that changes the completion dates of the original project. Do I have a motion to adopt the resolution as submitted? Or, I'm sorry, this is a request. Do I have a motion to adopt the request as submitted?
So moved.
Second, Your Honor.
Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The request is approved with all ayes. 11J, we have presented for City Council's consideration a request to enter into an intergovernmental transfer of public funds with the Iowa Department of Human Services. This agreement is required in order to participate in ground emergency medical transport of Medicaid patients. Is there a motion to approve the request as submitted?
So moved. Second.
We have a motion by Councilman Malcolm with a second by Councilman Harvey. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The request is approved. 11K, I have presented for City Council's consideration a request to approve the lease of a new copier printer for the Finance Department. The current copier is under a lease that will end in December of 2019. The new copier lease will provide the same capabilities at a much lower cost due to the state-local government contract that the city was able to use. Is there a motion to approve the request as submitted?
So moved, Your Honor.
Second, Your Honor.
We have a motion by Councilman Fitzgerald with a second by Councilman Brackett. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The request is approved with all ayes. We're on 11L, and we have presented for City Council's consideration a request to approve the issuance of 2 purchase orders for the replacement of the city's data network, backbone switches, and network access control. This will better control data routing, traffic management, and tighten security. Bids were received from 13 vendors, with the lowest qualified bid coming from Converge One in the amount of $35,928. In addition, the IT department requests authorization to issue a purchase order to Windsor Consulting in the amount of $11,360 for services related to the network switches. There's $77,000 already budgeted for these items. So we're going to do them in 2 sections. For the first one, the request to authorize the issuance of a purchase order to Converge One of West Des Moines for $35,928.90 for network switches and related items. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Go ahead.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion by Councilman Brackett with a second by Councilman Fitzgerald. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? This request is approved. And the second one, the request to authorize the issuance of a purchase order to Windsor Consulting in the amount of $11,360 for engineering configuration and other services related to the network switches. Do I have a motion to approve this request?
So moved, Your Honor.
Second.
Motion by Councilman Brackett with a second by Councilman Saucedo. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The request is approved. Next, we have 11M. Presented for City Council's consideration is a request to approve change order number 3 for the High Strength Waste Project. This change order is for 4 items: the Baylor Pit exploration, the Baylor Pit redesign, additional bollards, is that right? Or bollards? Bollards. And ADA parking spot painting, totaling $14,340.25. Is there a motion to approve the request?
So moved. Second.
Councilman Harvey and Councilman Spread? Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? This request is also approved with all ayes. We're on 11N. Presented for City Council's consideration is a request to approve the issuance of a purchase order to PS Trax in the amount of $5,838 for the purchase of software for the tracking software for the fire department. There's $6,000 budgeted for the software. Is there a motion to approve the request?
So moved, Your Honor.
Second.
Second, Your Honor.
We have a motion by Councilman Brackett with a second by Councilman Fitzgerald. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? This request is approved with all ayes. We're on 11O. We have a review of communication to employees on the Title I ordinance change.
I would, on that, I don't know that it was, I'd like to make a motion on it because we discussed it at the last meeting that item number 6 was not in accordance to the code change that we had passed, and so I would move that we simply direct staff to strike number 6 from that and reissue that to the employees.
You're making a motion?
I am making a motion.
Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
And discussion?
If I might, Council and Mayor, explain the purpose of my memo to employees and where it came from. I'd also like to point out that this is an administrative function. Council sets the policy. This was an ordinance change and a policy change. It is common for me to send out information to employees when we make policy changes such as this and to ask them to sign off. I did ask our attorney, Matt Brick, to review this document before it went out, and he agreed that there was nothing what's the word I want? Disagreement, inconsistent with what the ordinance change calls for. The ordinance change did call for attention to be brought to the city administrator or the department head if there was an issue or concern raised in contact related to work-related conversations with council. The reason that I chose to use the word immediately was to make it as simple and clear to employees when they had conversations with the city council that they should let their department head or the city administrator know for the purpose of addressing those issues as quickly as possible. If there's a problem or an issue, as in any chain of command, the supervisors would like to be aware of it as soon as possible and be able to address it. There was no intent to circumvent the code or the new rules. That was simply to be as clear and simple for employees to understand as possible.
My reading of number 6, the way I read it was that any discussion needed to be reported, not just if there was an issue or a problem. Am I misreading that?
It says any work-related conversations, meetings, or issues.
So that would mean any conversation, not even if there wasn't an issue.
It says work-related.
Right.
So if you stopped by to say, hi, how are things going today, that's perfectly fine. We have no issue with that. If there was a question related to the work that the employee was doing or why they were doing what they were doing, then we would ask for that to be reported.
So when I requested information on this too, you said that this is a normal practice. Is this a normal, can you tell me what other precedents we've done this in the past? That we've had employees sign up on these?
Certainly. Every time we update the handbook, we ask them to sign. Every time that there's a significant policy change.
Can you
The
give me
social media
examples?
policy is one example that we did, probably 3 different times because we kept changing it.
And was the document just like this one, similar? That they
Very similar to this. And in addition, departments do it on their own on a regular basis as well. If they change a departmental policy or put out a memo to clarify something to employees, they ask their employees to initial off that they've read it and understand it.
Can you email us the 3 examples that you've done in the past times to the council?
Certainly, I'd be happy to.
Yes, I would say that if number 6 had wording along the lines of, if an employee has a conversation with an elected official where they feel that there was an issue, you know, if they have a concern, I guess I should say, if they have a concern about a conversation with an elected official, and then it followed with the text that's there, that would not concern me, because then it leaves it up to the employee to decide whether or not they felt like they were uncomfortable in that conversation, and that they should, and so that they would understand that if they were uncomfortable in any conversation, that they should immediately report an uncomfortable conversation. But this has got, the way that this is worded, if I am walking down the street and somebody's raking leaves and they're wearing a city shirt, works for, you know, over like at the art center, I drive past every day because I live on Mulberry. So I see people, if I happen to be riding my bike and I stopped and said, hey, how's it going with the raking? I'm using a very benign example, but they would be then required by this employee handbook edition to report that conversation. And that to me seems overkill. Whereas if it specified, if they had concerns about the conversation with an elected official, that they should make their supervisor and or the HR and or the city administrator aware of that immediately, that wouldn't bother me, because that would leave it up to situations where they had some concern of any kind. Whereas this states that every single conversation that they have that has anything to do in any way, shape, or form with their job, they're required to report immediately.
I don't think that our employees would understand that if they're out raking leaves and you stop and ask them how it's going today, that they would mean that was a work-related issue. But as I've mentioned before, this ordinance makes hourly employees really uncomfortable. They are not accustomed to talking to you. They don't know what they should be talking to you about and what they shouldn't be talking to you about. And this, they don't always know what might be an issue and what might not be, because they don't necessarily have access to all of the information. They just know what task they're tasked with doing that day, depending on what position they're in. So this was intended to make it as simple for them to understand as they could and not have to have them questioning. We're not asking employees, if you stop by and ask them how they're doing today, how are things going, to report that. That's perfectly fine, and it has happened in the past on a regular basis. We've all had, there are a number of employees here tonight who have had those kinds of conversations with city council. Those aren't the kinds of things that we're talking about.
So a question in response to that then is, are you saying that the individual staff don't know if they're uncomfortable?
No, I understand they know if they're uncomfortable.
So we could add that text into it instead and say, if you feel uncomfortable with a conversation where an elected official has approached you, then follow it with the information that's there.
I'm not sure that makes it any clearer to them. If they're uncomfortable, they certainly can report it. We already have policies in place for them to report things that make them uncomfortable
Okay.
or are difficult for them. The harassment policies are already in place if they're feeling that that's the case.
Then this is redundant text.
I don't believe it's redundant text. This is an ordinance change where council can now have contact with employees that they've not been able to have in the past.
I understand that. I'm offering up a compromise though on this, from where the difference between striking it entirely, which is my current motion, versus adding in the option where it's up to the employee, if they don't feel comfortable with the conversation that they just had, then they should report it right away. Because that's what you're trying to get at based on what you told me, is that when somebody is uncomfortable with a conversation, you want to make sure that staff is aware of it right away. Am I wrong in that?
No, I think you've misunderstood what I mean, because
Okay.
there are issues that you may approach an employee and ask questions about that they're not uncomfortable with, but management may need to know or be aware that there's an issue or a question. So we want them to tell us if they've had a work-related conversation with a council member, so that if there's an issue or a problem, we can address it immediately. If there's not an issue or a problem, it's not an issue or a problem.
And do you not see that as potentially putting the same roadblock back in place? Because when they have to remember to immediately report every conversation they have, then they may just feel that it's just much simpler not to have any conversations whatsoever. So it would then basically contradict and work against the code change that the council passed.
I guess I don't see that.
Okay.
I basically, again, this is where I come from in something, in this, the wording that's come in when you say immediately, to me, puts a message of, in my view, optics of us versus them. And if we are a council with the city staff and employees, we're supposed to be a team. If I can't go down and talk to somebody working, picking up leaves without the concern that they have to go report something immediately, if I'm asking them how the new machine that we just purchased last year in the budget is operating for them, or if there's anything that we can do to improve that is constructive, that message, when they say immediately, needs to be reported to the department head, and you're trying to say, well, they're all scared. Well, I don't believe that you speak for all of them.
I'm not trying to say that they're all scared.
Well, you're saying
And
that they're
I'm
concerned
saying
about
that
what there is.
In your case of the leaf pickup, they're gonna go to Brian and say, hey, Councilmember Saucedo stopped by today and he was asking me how he liked the new machine. And Brian's gonna go, okay, great.
And that's if that's the view that
That's
you're
all
giving
the
of that
case.
perspective. But if we're trying to get constructive feedback, or if we're trying to get how things are, what can we do to improve, the wording of that sends the message to me that we are not working as a team. It is a us versus them when you have those optics, and that is the view that I look at it as.
And as I pointed out when I spoke to you on the phone, immediately is
Is your wording.
the word that I chose. As
But-
soon as possible, there are other words that I could have used, absolutely.
And
Like I
what
said, I
my
was trying to make
suggestion
this
was
as
is
simple and
bouncing those
clear.
ideas, because I'd asked you, where did you come up with that? And you said that was on your own. And so my suggestion was, do we have a team? Do we have another group that says, hey, this represents the employees, or this is a civil commission, or this is another group that says, hey, how does that wording look like? Does that actually, does it pass the litmus test? Does somebody look at that and then say, gosh, does that really, I think I don't want to talk to anybody.
If we have questions and concerns, we do discuss it at the staff meeting
But
level.
in this case,
and
you
we-
didn't. You
in
told me
this
you
case,
did
I
not.
didn't.
And that's what my question was, is if there's nobody, there's no policy, there's no procedure, there's no set plans of how you go back and say, how did we come up to this resolution? How did I come up with these 6 points? You said that was all you.
It was.
And so then
Based on
my-
the questions that I had, the 6 points were based on the questions that I had received from employees about how this ordinance was gonna, change was gonna affect them,
Okay.
what they needed to know about it, and how it was gonna affect them day to day, and what they were supposed to do if they were approached by a council
And
member.
I understand your perspective, but when you put yourself in our shoes, and we're trying to get the perspective of how can we improve, how can we find more information, how can we make our city better, that system and that wording to me is just completely the opposite. It sends the message that we don't want to talk to you. We would rather just do our job because we're concerned about our job. And at the very bottom, when you say, do you understand your rights and do you understand you have to sign off on this? That to me just, I would rather not talk about it anymore. Go ahead.
Councilman Harvey.
What if we just compromise a little bit and just drop the word immediately? That certainly changes the tone.
Number 6 is already what the code says, but
I would, as I stated earlier, I would be willing to amend my motion if we made it an optional thing in there, or clarified that if you have an issue that you are concerned about, you need to present that immediately. Because I do understand from an HR perspective, you don't want an employee to have an issue and then wait 6 months and then come tell you about it. I understand that, clearly. I've been in management, I get it. So the thing that I don't like about it is as Councilman Saucedo said, the immediately part, but also I don't like the requirement part of it, because it should be up to the employee as to whether or not they want to come and say, hey, by the way, you know, this elected official came to me and they said this, and it made me uncomfortable. That, you should want that reported right away. And so if we had a clarification in there where it was, like I said, that they had an issue with the conversation and they should report that part immediately, but it should not require them to come to you for every single communication that they have that happens to be related to their job, or something about city, but you know, something about what's going on in the city, because they may have valuable ideas that can spark an interest in one of us council members that we can then go do some research, come back, and then say, hey, you know, after having some conversations with city staff here and there, I came up with an idea. I'd like to bring it, you know, to staff. And, you know, that's the type of thing that we're looking at here, and this is gonna hinder that communication. I don't understand why there's this wall put in between staff and elected officials that doesn't need to be there. I mean, I've talked to elected officials in other cities. I've talked to elected officials here on the school board, where, you know, the school board members go in and they will go in and into each, you know, some of them anyway, I don't know if all of them do it, but some of them will go into each school during the year and stop in to classrooms, talk to teachers, ask them how things are going. What can they do as a board to make things better? Why don't we have that same right?
County's the same.
So that's what I'm going for, is I'm looking for the ability to communicate without anybody having any fear. So you put in the bit about if they are uncomfortable, which is a standard harassment policy type of wording, that if they have an issue, they bring it. Otherwise, I'm just gonna call for the vote and we're gonna strike it entirely. But I am okay with amending that if we can come to an agreement.
I don't have a problem adding that part of it in. If an employee is uncomfortable, certainly I hope that they would feel comfortable to come either to me or to their department head and say, I was uncomfortable with this conversation. The other part of that, though, is at some point managers need to be aware when there are issues and concerns so that they can be addressed. And if those are not made, they're not made aware of those things and they don't know they're out there, they can't address them and they can't fix them.
But it doesn't just say issues and concerns. It says conversations even. So it says conversations or issues and concerns.
So we can take the word conversations out. I don't have an issue with that. My point in the whole thing was to make sure that management staff does not get left out of the equation when there are concerns and issues that need to be addressed and that need to be addressed timely. We don't find out 3 or 4 weeks down the road that we had a problem we didn't even know about. Every organization has a chain of command and it should be respected. And that was the point of this.
So I guess my question in response to that would be, if I stop and talk to somebody about any topic related to their job, I won't go into leaf raking or whatever as an example, but just anything, and there's an issue that I notice when talking to them or that comes up, if I had not stopped and had that conversation, where would it get reported?
I don't know. I mean, they
And
may
that's
or may not.
That's the point I'm trying to make. So
They may
if
or
the
may not.
conversation didn't happen and I didn't know about it, or the conversation didn't happen and they didn't think about it because I didn't ask them about it, then it wouldn't have been an issue in the first place. Nobody would have thought about it. The issue would still be, the issue would still be there, but nobody would know about it
Certainly,
apparently.
and we don't.
So-
It may or may not, they may or may not have brought it to the attention of their supervisor, but your ordinance says that elected officials will also bring those concerns to the city administrator. So if you stop and talk to an employee and you hear that they have a concern, you should also be bringing it to the city administrator or to that department head.
Absolutely.
Again, so that it can be addressed.
And I
Why
have done that
isn't
in the
that
past.
enough?
Well, I'm seeing this and I'm finding this interesting. I think our intent for this was to open up lines of communication where we could freely talk, not because we're trying to press or move anything or change anything. And I think it's interesting. Let me use an example. Brian and I was at a meeting one day and we were talking about flooding, I think the levee meeting. And I says to him, how is it that Modern Woodland Park has these barriers and their baseball field is totally dry and everything in Davenport is wet? And he started laughing. He says, well, I said, well, can we find out when you have some time, or what do I need to do to help you? Let's find out, can we possibly consider putting those type of barriers up down here? And he says, yeah, if I have a moment. And then we both laughed about that because we know he's extremely busy. So for him to take time to do that research would probably be, so technically he should have went and talked to the city administrator after having this casual conversation with me. It wasn't me telling him what to do, is asking a question, we're sharing information. And that was the whole purpose of this, to open up the doors where we can share information with each other without any, and we also said, if the party on the other side, the employee has uncomfortability talking with us, all they have to do is say, I'd rather not talk to you, or whatever, and walk away, and it's fine.
And it does outline that for them.
Yeah,
And if I could, and I don't mean this to be disrespectful in any way, but this item was brought up at the previous meeting. I was not here. I didn't have any items on the agenda. The ordinance change was in effect that says that you could contact any employee about any questions or concerns that you have, and not one single council member called me and asked me why I wrote this memo the way that I did, or why. I reached out to Councilmember Saucedo myself and asked him if he would talk to me about it.
And I replied.
And you did reply.
And the reason why that it was given to me about an hour before the council meeting, and it was more that I reviewed it and understood really what it was, and those were the questions that I instantly started coming out with. How did this come about? Because obviously, I didn't know that we had that. I didn't know that I thought the attorney had written some of those things, because to me, the wording that we had already requested was open two-way communications. We talked about that in the council meeting that we were requesting. So when I read 6, to me, that was almost like a complete opposite view of this. This is some sort of a waiver of them releasing, their ability to be able to not talk to us, in my perception of what I explained to you.
And like I told you, that was certainly not my intention. But if the goal is honestly open two-way communication, I would have appreciated a council member reaching out to me and talking to me about it before it came up on the public floor.
Yeah, and that's why I said I followed up with that, and I can understand that. But again, when we have those types of informations that get to my hands where we didn't even know that change was coming about, and to me, that was where I requested, what precedent did this come from? Because I don't remember having any ordinance changes ever having the full employees sign off on it. But Nancy had explained to us that was actually coming from the fact that the employee handbook had been updated. So then the employee handbook is what drove that. But then if that's the case, then tell me what other cases we've had the employee handbook. Because I read this, it's almost it concerns me. It obviously, to me, I don't like the wording of it when we basically said we're asking for two-way communications. We want to better the community. And I want to make sure that the optics are not us versus them.
And I can assure you that staff works regularly and diligently to do our best to improve the community as well. It was not my intention in any way to try to circumvent this code change. It was to try to be clear for the employees who are not always comfortable, don't necessarily even know who you folks are, to understand how they can interact with you in a way that feels okay to them, and when they should talk to their supervisors about it. That's all the intention was. I'm happy to change some of the wording, although I am not completely happy to change it exactly as Councilmember Brackett is suggesting, because there are times that employees should be reporting to their supervisors. Whether they're uncomfortable or not is irrelevant. There's information that managers need to do their jobs that they should be getting when those conversations occur. Whether that comes from the council member or from the employee, it doesn't really matter, but it should be shared with the management staff.
Okay, so in looking, and I'm going back through this, but a quick question. So you're saying that this document was attached to a previous council agenda?
No, it was
The
not.
employee handbook edition?
No, sir.
Okay, then I don't know how.
I emailed it.
Because I wanted to apologize. So, or you sent it to us?
I did not send it to council. I don't typically send internal communication to employees to the city council.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure, because I was going to apologize if this had been brought to our attention prior to the last meeting. I was going to apologize for not addressing it directly to you outside of that meeting, but
Somebody received it before the last meeting,
I
because
had-
it came up at the last
I
meeting, is
received
all
it.
I meant,
I
so.
received it, so that's why I'm telling you.
because
that
I
got it.
had a city employee that I ran into at an event in between the time they got this and in between the time they handed it in, and they said, well, I guess I can have a conversation with you right now, but I won't be able to tomorrow. And they were kind of joking around, but that is the kind of thing that this gives me concern about. The other thing, and I'm going to read through this real quick, just the bullet points on this. So employees have the option whether to talk to a council member. If an employee does not wish to speak to the council member, or to the member of the council, they are free to decline. That's item 1.
Okay, can I tell you why I put that in there?
No, please let me continue.
Okay,
And I'll absolutely give you
okay.
the floor right after that. Item 2, interaction with council members should be scheduled as much as possible and should not interfere with accomplishing work. So far, I totally agree with both of these things. Okay, 3, employees should be aware that city council can only take action as a body. They are not direct supervisors and therefore cannot issue work directives to employees. Same page still, absolutely.
Okay.
Issues, concerns, or decisions that would normally be handled by management personnel should continue to be addressed to the supervisor, department head, or city administrator as would normally occur. Absolutely agree. Maybe even a line right there that would say as soon as possible, bring that to the attention of those individuals. Number 5, union members should refrain from any discussion with council members related to contract items or negotiations. Doing so is a violation of the law. As my understanding, that is correct too, so I don't have an issue there. I believe that was also approved by the city attorney. I'm not knowledgeable in union law, so I will take that as it is. To me, what you're trying to accomplish, which is making, or what you said you're trying to accomplish, which is making the employees aware that they are free to decline communication with us, and that if there's anything work-related, any issue that has to do with city business where there's a problem, it's already addressed in those first 5 items that they need to take it to their supervisor, or that they're also free to decline a conversation with us. So number 6, I'm going back to where I originally stood on it, which is that I'm going to stand on my motion, which is to strike that from this document, to direct staff to strike this from that document. Because everything that protects the employee and city staff in the concerns that you've expressed to me stand in the top part. Oh, and number 6 is employees who meet with the mayor or city council member are required to report any work-related conversations, meetings, or issues to the department head city administrator immediately, is the item number 6, which, as I stated, I believe is best covered under item number 3, or item number 4, sorry, item number 4. Kind of
It's
a
also-
combination of the two.
It's also explained very thoroughly in the ordinance amendment that we had already had.
Now, can I contradict him on that real quick? Because I know the answer on that, and I actually like the answer, because I did ask the city administrator about that, and the response was that most employees probably aren't reading the code, and I agree, because a lot of people don't read the code. I mean, I read the code all the time, but I don't expect other people to do it. So I definitely, and that was why we requested that something be added to the employee handbook, making the employees aware that they didn't have to talk to us, that they weren't under pressure to talk to us, because I don't want current or future council members to make people think that they have to talk to them. And so having it in the employee handbook is appropriate. Still just the issue with line 6, and now I'll stop talking.
The only thing in line 6 that I changed from what the ordinance says is the word immediately, and that was only to give employees some guidance about, we'd like you to let us know as quickly as possible. The ordinance says, meetings, issues, or concerns raised by department head, staff, or elected officials shall be brought to the attention of the city administrator. That's in the code.
That's what we struck.
So
That's what we changed.
No. I cut and pasted this right from the change of the ordinance.
That's
change.
the beginning, I think, what you're talking about. All department activity requires attention, city council, elected officials shall have access. Say that again, what you just said.
Elected officials shall have access to department heads or staff employees for the purpose of open and two-way communications. Any meetings, issues, or concerns raised by department heads, staff, or elected officials shall be brought to the attention of the state administrator.
Yeah, what's the
So,
very last sentence?
Then,
That's the new ordinance. So the only change that I made in number 6 was to add the word immediately.
and the work-related conversations, does that?
Again, that was to try to be clear for employees to understand what we were referring to.
Yeah, see, and I think that's the part that caught me then. So I still think everything's fully covered in the rest of this document. I don't see a point for number 6.
Doesn't number 3, can you read number 3 again? Doesn't it clearly say the issues need to be reported to the supervisor?
Number 4 does.
Number 4.
Issues, concerns, or decisions that would normally be handled by management personnel should continue to be addressed to the supervisor, department head, or city administrator as would normally occur. And in this particular case, the code, as you stated, the code is in this document, so the code is in the employee handbook, pointed out very clearly to the staff. But the addition, it was the addition of the extra wording in there that makes it additionally difficult for me. So I don't see a point in leaving number 6 on there, so I'm going to stand on my motion. And
Is there any other discussion? We have a motion by Councilman Brackett. Would you like to restate your motion?
my motion is to direct staff to strike number 6 from the the employee handbook. This doesn't have, I don't think this has a page number. It would
This
be.
isn't in the employee handbook yet. This was just a memorandum sent
Okay.
to employees.
So then, to strike number 6 from the memo in question, is that good enough for this? Okay, so
Yes.
strike number 6 from the memo in question from, and redirect it for publication and signatures by the employees.
I'll second it.
And Councilman Salcedo, second? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
The request passes with 4 ayes and 3 nays. We are on 11P. Thank you. We have a discussion and possible action on ending the city administrator's contract. This was brought up by Councilman Brackett. I would ask you to lead the discussion.
Okay, so normally contract review for the city administrator would be required to be completed by 10/31 of each calendar year. At some point in the process of developing a new review, that timing was pushed back. I would ask that the review process be completed as soon as possible, and that all members of the council receive the completed documents no later than 11/21. It is also my understanding that the city administrator has applied for and been approved for FMLA since the last council meeting. Given this change since the last meeting, I would move that we appoint Mark Aronson as the interim city administrator, city clerk, and this is, I actually will real quick hand over to Mr. Brick, if you could explain why I mentioned Mark Aronson.
Yes, Mr. Brackett, or Councilmember Brackett had called me about any groups that handle interim city administrator work, and I let him know there are a number of people around the state, one of whom is Mark Aronson. He's the former city manager for the city of Waukee. He's now retired and does only interim city administrator work. He's not someone who would handle the job long-term or would accept it even if it was offered. He's currently finishing up interim city administrative work for the city of Windsor Heights. He's not exactly sure when that's going to be winding down. I'm also the city attorney for Windsor Heights, and we are not exactly sure when the new person will be on board. But I do know that he has worked for multiple cities at a time before. And if the council wanted to get someone in, there would be a number of names that I could provide for you. I do know he would be one of those names if that was something you wanted to do.
Okay.
Thank you.
And in addition to that, as I understand that when when he's first available, he will only be available part-time? That was correct?
Yeah, but in terms of what that would be, like days or
Right.
hours, it's still unknown.
Sure. And so, and in that, and because he would be new to Muscatine, I would also look at appointing a deputy city administrator and clerk. And that, I don't think he's, the obvious choice to me would be the most senior-most department head, and that would be, I believe that's Rich Climbs. Also, I don't know that we should, anyway, with the budget coming up, I think Nancy's got plenty of work on that to do. So it seemed to me that that would maybe not, the way that it currently is, wouldn't want to leave that. So that's 2 points of it. In that, I would also, and I'll make the formal motion.
May I request that you not, in your motion, not have multiple items?
Right,
Take them one at a
exactly.
time.
And so we're in the discussion portion now, which is, I'm just kind of going through the points that I've got. So, assuming that that one, if that one passes, at that point in time, I would have an additional motion to transfer the access to the city administrator email account and whatnot to the interim. And then at the, let's see, yeah, okay, sorry, wrote it down so that I wouldn't forget anything. And then given that, I would also, basically, the reason for doing that, and also I had some questions too about the cell phone, because I don't know if his cell phone is a personal cell phone or if he has a work cell phone for that position, but there may be some issues there, because we want to make sure that people aren't trying to call him about city business while he's recuperating. And I don't know all the ins and outs of FMLA, but I want to make sure that we respect that as much as possible. So, given the changes, since I requested the original agenda item, I would then also table the discussion on his contract until the December 5th meeting. And so these are the things that I'm.
And I'm paraphrasing, so again,
Okay.
correct me if I'm wrong. It sounds like motion one would be to have the evaluation done and provided to all of you no later than November 21st.
Correct.
To appoint an interim of some sort.
Exactly.
And to table any action on the contract for a later date.
Correct.
Okay.
So basically what that does then is allows us to move forward. So
Could I ask you to maybe make a slight modification? Instead of giving SADA Consulting a deadline, could we just ask them to complete the evaluation and provide the results to council as soon as reasonably? Because maybe they can't meet that November 21st deadline. I don't know how much work they have yet to do.
right.
So I hate to impose that deadline.
Well, it involves the schedule of all of us in this room as well, doesn't it?
Yes.
But it would,
So,
my understanding from what you just said was you wanted that before the December 5th meeting.
Well, I did have a date in there of 11/21.
Okay.
However,
That's
prior
pretty
to the
soon.
December 5th meeting would be, I think, acceptable as well, but as soon as possible.
when it
I
seemed reasonable
hope-
to.
I hope there wouldn't be a delay with that, since we've all got contact by her asking her, can she continue and move forward? I'm understanding that she's trying to finish, because she already knows that we've been behind schedule with her portion of it, and we stopped everything when we, after our last meeting, she had to put on brakes on when she was doing so. Now we'd like to ask her to move forward exponentially and get it to us and let us.
Correct, but I don't think we know what's left to be done time-wise to where we can say, have it to us by November 21st, or have it to us by December 5. I'm not in a position to tell her how fast she can move.
Well, I'm sure if she can't have it by one of those dates, just like she sent us an email asking, can she continue moving forward? She can send us an email and inform us of how soon or how quickly she can complete her end of the show, which is necessary for us to move forward in what we're trying to accomplish. That just seems reasonable to me. I don't see a big deal with it. I mean, I'm not saying if she doesn't do it, there'd probably be a penalty clause or anything. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying if we put a target date out there, hopefully she can meet that date for us and with us. If not, she can come back and say, no, I can't have it done by this date. I will have it done by this date. Okay, fine. You know, I mean, how many times have we just had a change order for some of the work being done, and they said, hey, we didn't finish it by that time, and we need to December, whatever, to finish what we're doing. Okay, fine. It's not a big issue. So I don't see that being a big hindrance. It just, it gives impetus to let it know, we need to get this done and we need to move forward with that, because like he just pointed out, and Ms. Nancy and I've joked about it, we have budget hearings coming in. That's gonna be really intense here. We have a lot of stuff we need to talk about.
So what about this, Alan? If I stick with my target date of 11/21, but just ask that if it is going to exceed that date, that Ms. Sita let us know, and let us know what date she thinks that she can meet, so that we.
That's fine.
If I could, sorry, Mr. Harvick, go ahead.
Well, I'm just pointing out as far as that date's concerned, realize.
I understand.
She has to interview all of us, and I don't think she's interviewed Greg yet. And so when is she gonna be able to do that? I don't know. So keep that
Mr.
in
Brick
mind.
has a comment.
Councilmember Harvey, to your point, the HR director just notified me, we'll contact Ms. Seda as soon as we can tomorrow and let you guys know. If she
Okay.
says the 21st is doable, or if it's not, whatever it is, we will send you that update as soon as we can.
Okay, that's sufficient.
I
for
would
me.
appreciate that.
Thank you.
So we're not dictating, we're asking her when can she do it.
So then your motion is as soon as possible? Because how can we put a fixed date if we don't know?
That's gonna end up being what it probably is.
An agreed upon date?
Yeah.
Best date possible.
Okay.
Continue.
All right. So and this is a question for Mr. Brick, to make sure that I word things properly. In the section about appointing an interim city administrator / city clerk, because we don't know necessarily whether Mr. Aronson would accept that, but what I would state in there is just another individual that we could acquire through your connection. Is that correct?
I mean, at the end of the day, the problem, the big issue is, we don't know what they would
Right.
charge or how many hours. I think probably for that, and I hate to delay anything, but to maybe charge me with getting you
Yeah.
options and get as much info as you guys need, and then if that's
Okay.
the way you want to go, at your next meeting, you could take an action if you wanted to.
So then what I'll do is I will make the motion to direct, and I'm not making the motion yet, but I will make that motion to direct you to seek out that individual and determine whether or not they're available and or provide additional options to the council. In the meantime, appointing Rich Climbs as the deputy city administrator / deputy clerk, to get him familiarized with that so that he can, that can be handed over from where that's being handled right now, so they can focus on their things, and then he'll be able to work directly with this person as they come on and get them onboarded and make sure that they're able to manage things in the city administrator's absence. So, okay. Just seeing if anyone else had any other input at this
I
time.
just one idea here is when A.J. Johnson resigned his position here with the city of Muscatine, we had an interim in place, and that was Public Works Director Randy Hill. We had someone that knew the city, knew the employees. We have excellent staff, department head here. I don't think we need to bring somebody in from outside to do this job, personally. Besides the fact that if he's from the Des Moines area, we're gonna be transportation charges and so forth, and you're gonna spend a lot of money. And I think our staff is very capable. We put someone in as the lead, knowing all well that the rest of them will follow in and assist whenever necessary. And to my information, being here for 28 years, Nancy is the one with the most senior person. So she, in my opinion, she could handle that. She has an excellent staff underneath her.
And that's not in question. My question on that is that it is my understanding and my belief that somebody, that we really should have a separation between the person managing the entire organization and the person that is handling all of the money for the organization. Like that, those two things, in my belief, should not be blended into one person. And that's for that individual, and that is no question whatsoever on Nancy at all. That is strictly the way that I see things, how things should be operated. You shouldn't have somebody that's at the top of the chain be also at the top of the money. Those should be two separate checks and balances. And that's just that's for public safety of taxpayers' dollars. And that, once again, is not calling into question anything whatsoever with the individual.
Then we could ask the department heads which one feels most capable and time-wise, and would be filling that position. Whether it's Nancy or whether right now we have two people doing it, and I think it's.
And one's in charge of money and one's in charge of public safety, so.
Yeah.
It makes the most sense to go with the senior department head rather than try to pick and choose amongst them.
So.
Are we talking about the temporary administrator or the deputy?
Deputy.
I'm talking about the deputy. I think
I'm
Phil was
talking
talking
about
about
Deputy.
the temporary, which.
Yeah, you were talking about.
The interim.
Yeah.
as far as the interim, the way I understood the motion that the councilman just said was that he was asking City Attorney Brick to explore some interim people. When he does, that would come back and that would be the opportunity to make the decision on whether or not you wanted to go with somebody far away and pay gas money and those kinds of things. The request, I believe you just said, was just to ask him to.
Right, and so he could include Randy Hill in that group if that, you know, that wouldn't exclude a former city employee necessarily from that group.
I think he was talking about, I think he was talking about Brian.
It was just a,
No, he said,
Example.
he
it
said,
was just an example of how it was handled
Because he was
10
the
years
public
ago.
works director.
previously.
And he,
Yes.
yeah, and
Okay.
because we were without a city administrator for like 3 months. And AJ went on to Des Moines area and Randy filled in, because once again, he was senior, he had knowledge of the city for a long time, and it fit well. And his department, not saying they didn't need him, but they work well on their own anyway. And I think we have the same situation with these. If you're gonna, if you wanna start bringing up some motions and seeing if they fly,
Yeah.
I'm
Go ahead.
done with.
That's fine.
Do you have more?
Let me just
Go ahead.
confirm, I guess, what Phil is saying, because in probably the 12 years that I attended budget sessions as a citizen and as a council member, as far as that goes, as I recall, Randy Hill was at every budget session. And I think he put in more hours than any city employee I could even imagine, and he was commuting every day from Iowa City. So, I mean, he is the one, if he could do it and would accept it, I think he could hit the ground running as far as being one of the candidates for temporary city administrator, or interim city administrator, or whatever term you want to
He
use.
is retired, but I think that would be a discussion to,
Well, so are these others that
down the road.
they're on the list.
But that's what they do now.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, and I don't have an issue with him being included in that group. I
Sure.
just, to me, it also, you know, we also have the option, you know, the resource where there's individuals that do this this is what they do all the time. And so that was why I had reached out to Mr. Brick for that information, because, you know, as I've understood it, you know, we're fairly leanly staffed throughout the city. So having people take on additional duties, additional tasks, is going to cause whatever their normal job is, you know, to suffer in some way, shape, or form, no matter how good of an employee, no matter how dedicated they are. And so, given that we're going into budget season soon, it did not make sense to me for this reason, as well as the other one that I mentioned, for Nancy to be in that role. And then with Chief Evers, to me, that's, you know, he's in charge of our fire department, and so I do not want to distract him from those duties either. We're going into a season where, yes, there'll be, you know, quite a bit of shoveling and things like that for, you know, the Parks Department, but, and maybe, correct me if I'm wrong, my understanding was that Rich was the senior department, had been a department head longer than anyone else.
Been
So that was,
employed with the city longest.
you know, that was,
Can I comment?
yeah, absolutely.
Yes.
Rich has been a department head longer than anybody's been a department head.
Right.
But he doesn't have the most seniority with things. Some of the, and it's really up to council and.
Sure.
But some of the, with Jerry, he has gone to all the budget meetings for all the departments the last couple of years. He has a real good overall balance of city departments. And everybody's not, well, they were asked to go to one other budget hearing except their own. But unless you see everybody's, you really don't see the big picture. So Jerry has some value. Randy Hill, when he was here, he had the value because he had seen all the, you know, heard all the budget presentations. So there's value there. And going into budget, you know, this interim thing, if, with the budget, it gets real intense with the city administrator and finance director meeting with each department head to go over the budget. So the hours an interim would have to do to put in to cover all those meetings wouldn't be a small amount of hours.
Okay.
So I guess we're, and then that would be new to the whole process of the budget. You know, and I'm not endorsing Randy, but he still has the knowledge of the city operation, and he doesn't have as much commute time.
Sure.
And if he was interested, he could be considered.
Yeah, that part's not. What I'm gonna make a motion on is is starting that search process, but also appointing a deputy city administrator / clerk for whoever is the interim. And that was where I was going to make the motion to appoint Rich. But based on what you're telling me, it would make sense probably to have Rich and Jerry share that position. That frees you up for your budget work and has the ability of taking on, the experience that you said Jerry has, as well as having a backup for him so that all of the work that you're talking about, if they are providing information to the eventually appointed interim, it doesn't burden one individual down. So I think it would make sense then, the motion that I will end up making will include having Rich and Jerry share equally in that responsibility. I think that would make sense, because that, taking the information that you've just provided, which I value, then I think that would make sense to have that, And with having, then we have somebody that's been to all of the budget sessions, for a number of years. And then we also have somebody that's been a department head in the city for the longest amount of time. So those are two types of experience that I think would be good to be able to share with whoever's the interim and share that responsibility. So that'll be the motion that I make in a moment, unless we have further discussion.
Why don't you make a motion?
Okay.
So we have some
Start with your first
discussion
motion.
on the item at hand.
Okay. Okay, so on the agenda item itself, I'm gonna table that, so.
So you need to make a motion to table
I move to
that.
table the discussion of the city administrator's contract until the December 5th meeting.
Excuse me?
We have a motion by Councilman Brackett to table the discussion to end the city administrator's contract until December 5th, seconded by Councilman Saucedo.
I'd like to have him speak up next time, please.
What's that?
He said
Speak up next time.
Councilman Malcolm, how do you vote?
Aye.
Councilman Harvey?
Can we have the discussion on this before we vote? Because we haven't discussed the motion yet.
The motion, we were just motion.
Table it, yeah.
It was to
Well,
table it.
Yeah, but we ought to
Okay.
discuss the tabling. shouldn't
Okay.
we? I go along with tabling, but I don't go along with the December 5th. I think it ought to be tabled up until the time the council receives the input from SEDA Consulting. Or SEDA Consulting, however it's pronounced. So I object to setting a deadline.
Okay. Any other discussion?
I would respond to that and just say that then it's on an agenda, and we don't have to have a meeting to set it on an agenda. And so we can always table it again if we don't have the information.
Okay, so you're putting that in writing, or verbally saying that you would not be opposed to tabling it again if it needed to be.
I would have to have an extremely good reason to table it again at that meeting, because
What if SEDA didn't come through yet? Would that be good enough?
I'm not saying I would table it again at that one. I may call for I may proceed with it. But what I'm saying is that we need to get it on, I feel the need to put it on the agenda, on the future agenda, and I'm willing to table it for now until that meeting. So my motion is to table, and we did skip the discussion at first, but we did have one vote. The motion stands to table it until the December 5th meeting.
Just a point of order, Mr. Brick. Motion to table, is it supposed to be discussed?
Motion to table is typically acted on immediately.
And no discussion.
It
And
can
no
be.
discussion. Yeah.
It can be, but it's typically,
But I do think, you know, given the nature of this, I think Mr. Harvey's comments were
Yeah.
fine.
I was fine with his comments, I just didn't agree.
so we have Councilman Malcolm and I. Councilman Harvey,
Nay.
Councilwoman Brockert,
Aye.
Councilman Salcedo,
Aye.
Councilman Spread,
Nay.
Councilman Fitzgerald,
Nay.
Councilman Brackett.
Aye.
The motion carries with 4 ayes, 3 nays to table the discussion and possible action on ending the city administrator's contract to December 5th.
Okay, so on the other items, I would move to have the city attorney put together a list of names of potential interim city administrators and present that to council for discussion at to present that information as soon as possible so that we can potentially set a special meeting because of time, due to timing.
Yes, sir.
So once again, I'll restate that. I make a motion for the city attorney to provide the city council with a list of names for potential interim city administrators as soon as possible, at which point, when we receive it, we can set a special meeting to discuss that.
And to Councilmember Fitzgerald's point, I already wrote down Randy Hill, but if there are any other names that you would like me to contact to speed this along, let me know as soon as possible.
Well,
I don't want anyone to be
my
missed.
point with Randy's name being brought up was just the fact that he was a department head that we utilized.
Yes, sir.
And I'm not in favor of going outside the city to have an interim anything.
Do I have a second to Councilman Brackett's motion?
Second it.
Any discussion?
Yes, Your Honor. I
Go ahead.
tend to agree with Councilman Fitzgerald that we should stick as close to Muscatine as possible.
So Councilman Brackett's motion is to ask the city attorney, Matt Brick, to bring back some names for us to discuss regarding an interim. Councilman Malcolm, how do you vote?
Aye.
Councilman Fitzgerald,
Nay.
Councilman Saucedo,
Aye.
pardon me,
Aye.
Councilwoman Brockert,
Aye.
Councilman Harvey,
Aye.
Councilman Spread,
Nay.
Councilman Brackett.
Aye.
The motion carries with 5 ayes and 2 nays.
Okay. So then under the section about where we currently sit, before we have that in place.
Right.
What I would make the motion to appoint Jerry Evers and Rich Climbs as deputy city administrator and deputy city clerk to carry out those duties together between now and the time that we have an interim city administrator, and to assist that interim city administrator during the process of while they're performing their duties.
I'll second that motion.
Any discussion? Councilman Malcolm, how do you vote?
Aye.
Councilman Saucedo,
Aye.
Councilwoman Brockert,
Aye.
Councilman Harvey,
Aye.
Councilman Spread,
Nay.
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 Councilman Fitzgerald,
Nay.
Councilman Brackett.
Aye.
The motion carries with 5 ayes and 2 nays. So the motion was to appoint Richard Climbs and Jerry Evers as deputy city administrators effective immediately, I assume.
And then the last thing addressed on that is to make sure that, and this I don't know if it needs to be a motion or just ask consensus, but to make sure that our information technology manager provides access to those accounts immediately to, and I'm assuming that I think Jerry's been acting in that role already, so probably already has that. If not, that he should immediately be given access to that email account so that he can perform those duties, and that Rich Climbs in that co-role also be given the same access. So, Mr. Brick, do you think, does that need to be a motion, or can I just ask consensus for that?
I mean, you've already appointed them as deputy city
Okay.
clerks, I think.
Okay, so those things should be done, and,
So then, Mr. Monsager is not going to be included on that email anymore?
no, well, it's my understanding he's on FMLA, so that would then.
Yeah, whether he is or not, he's on leave, so.
Yeah, he should not be accessing that, and city staff should not be, and correct me if I'm wrong, please, but city staff should not be contacting him for city business, because that would be a violation, other than an occasional outreach if there's something that maybe he only is the one that has the information on, right? Is that?
Yeah,
how does that work?
incidental of, hey, where's that file? That's okay, but, to the extent possible, the city shouldn't be bothering him while he's trying to recuperate.
Right, and that was my understanding, so. And that was where the question with, I don't know where where his work cell phone falls into place, or how that works, so I don't know if that needs to also be addressed.
Greg uses his personal cell phone as his work cell phone.
Okay.
So that's part of his employment agreement.
And the two people you've already appointed have city cell phone, correct? I mean, Chief does and Rich.
They get cell phone allowances.
But I mean, we already have numbers that the staff knows how to contact those individuals, correct?
Correct, yes.
Okay, and then, so just to make sure so if he has that phone, if people are I mean, I don't want to take his personal phone away from him, but if people are contacting him, can we ask, I don't know if we ask him to turn around and
Certainly, yeah.
and just make sure that gets referred back to City Hall instead of trying to, I wouldn't want him to be burdened with that, so.
Well, if Stephanie hasn't, that's typically in FMLA, is we let people know if something gets through to your personal and we need to address it, please let us
Okay.
know. If she hasn't already, we will.
Okay,
And the same thing, I don't think it went unsaid, but I assumed you wanted Ms. Romanelli and/or myself to contact Ms. Seda, as we said, as soon as possible.
Yes.
And get her done as quickly as she can be done.
absolutely.
So we don't pay a cell phone allowance then to the city administrator?
His contract provides that the city will supply him with a cell phone.
Okay. I still don't, I mean, if that's the only cell phone that, if he doesn't exclusively use it for work, if he uses it for personal as well, then I'm not sure anything on that. I just want to make sure that we're following the FMLA rules, so.
So I have a question. So since he's home being treated and trying to recover, the emails are going to go to the fire chief and Rich Klein. Is there a way to direct the city administrator's emails?
I believe, and that would, I'm not 100% sure how the Google part works, but maybe John could come up and.
So he shouldn't have access now,
I
is
didn't
the way
see
I
John.
understand
Well, I
it.
saw John, but I didn't see John. Okay, sorry, John. Yeah, because I'm asking you because you're a computer geek.
I know.
Probably what we'll wind up doing is just doing a forwarding so that anything new would come into that. There would be some, attempt to give access to those two individuals to that mailbox would be definitely cumbersome.
Yeah.
So I think what we'll probably do is just wind up forwarding anything incoming to their respective mailboxes.
That would then, yeah, unless something comes up where we need to look at something previous, so if they need to if they get it contacted by somebody, they need to go back and look at something before.
Yeah,
They're
we'll-
not
we'll make
gonna be
that
able to
happen
see
then,
it.
if that's the
So
case.
does, and I don't actually want to ask too many technical questions, and
We'll talk later.
so, but yeah, if there is a method utilizing the system that we have to allow access, like admin rights is the, I'll just use that as a generic way to describe it, to give admin rights to those two individuals where they could log into that account. I know that's a possibility in a number of other systems I'm familiar with. I don't know in our system if it is.
It's not that straightforward.
Okay.
I think John knows what he needs to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, well,
I think
you
we
see,
need
my-
to spend
I think
time
our,
here
I think our
trying to tell
concern
him what
is,
to do.
he's homesick, he's being treated, and the last thing I want to do if I'm homesick and being treated is be bombarded with stuff I don't want to deal with or don't need to deal with. We want to make sure that we continue functioning and flowing, but stuff that needs to be decided to go to the chief or decline and then let them do it and keep the patient home being treated and getting better.
Yeah, I think that's, I agree with Phil on this. I think that,
Just let him do his job.
yeah, John can work that out. So thank you, John.
You bet.
And then we're gonna strike the last item on the agenda then, since we're waiting for Ms. Seba.
Yeah,
We're not there
that's why I
yet.
had it moved to that. But, so then the other thing too that I would want to do, and this will be dependent upon how soon we get an interim in. Like I said, I want to make sure that we expedite that. But I would also want to direct that, and I'm seeking consensus on this, not making a motion, but direct that interim city administrator to review all personnel changes that have occurred since the October 17th city council meeting. It was my understanding that there was at least one employee terminated since that meeting, and if that termination is found that it does not reflect the best interests of the city, I would expect that that person be reinstated and an explanation be provided to the council, and as well as anything else that has occurred since the last council meeting. And so I'm just seeking consensus on that, and that would take place when the new interim comes in. So you would all have a say in who that interim is as well.
I don't think that should happen, that the interim comes in and then overturns actions taken by previous administration.
No, it wasn't.
This was
After he was gone.
after he announced his FMLA.
Staff has the right to determine who their staff is. It's not a council action.
No, it's an administrative function.
And I'm seeking that somebody doing an administrative function, so.
We have a lot of people here in the audience tonight who have a lot of concerns about one of our city staff that were let go since the city administrator has been on leave. And that is a big concern with a lot of our community members, contractors, builders, and trying to do the best that we can for our community moving forward with good economic development. It's important to us what the thoughts and concerns are of our citizens, our builders, our contractors. So it makes sense to me to do a review, since it happened without the city administrator. It's my understanding that many times when staff have personnel change, that the department head has the opportunity to speak with the city administrator and run those kinds of more difficult decisions by the city administrator. And with him not being there, I think it makes sense to be able to do a relook.
Right. And
Is that what you're talking about?
Yes, exactly. And so I'm just asking if there's 3 besides me or more that would agree to have the interim, when they take their seat, review in specifically any terminations, but any negative actions to, and along those lines since the city administrator took leave.
You're looking for a consensus?
I'm just looking for consensus.
Councilman Malcolm?
I'll consent to that. Basically, you're asking this temporary administrator to review the actions that were taken and records and talk, whatever, and say if they're comfortable with this, or if they think it was a good call.
Right.
Yeah, well, that's fine. they're probably better equipped for it than I am.
Councilman Fitzgerald?
No.
Councilman Salcedo?
I'm good with it.
Councilwoman Brockert?
No, just because I think it sets a bad precedent for any future occurrences.
Councilman Harvey?
No.
Councilman Spread?
No.
That motion, or that, you do not have consensus on that?
Gotcha.
Do you have more?
Nope.
Okay. Next, we are on my paper. Q. And Q is not necessary because we already talked about it under P. So we will move on down to communications from council members. First of all, I would like to just remind folks that Monday is Veterans Day. Please, in honor of our veterans, do all you can to thank our veterans. And in honor of them, all of the administrative offices for the city will be closed on Monday. Councilman Salcedo, do you have anything tonight?
Just wanted to welcome the new council members coming in January. That's all I have.
Councilman Harvey?
Nothing tonight, Your Honor.
Councilwoman Brockert?
I was going to mention Veterans Day, Your Honor, since I am the proud daughter of one. And if anyone has some time on Saturday morning, please come down to Island Cemetery. We will be having a memorial service at 11 a.m.
Thank you. Councilman Fitzgerald?
Nothing at this time.
Councilman Spread?
Nothing at this time, thank you.
Councilman Malcolm?
Nothing tonight, Your Honor, thank you.
Councilman Brackett?
I just was gonna say that I had been contacted by a resident at Clark House who had some issues that he made me aware of that I talked to Jody about, and she said that they're already aware of it, working on it, and will provide me some follow-up information later. And I just wanted to address that because I know he's watching tonight, so that's all.
Staff, did you have anything tonight?
I will be getting out the tentative budget meeting schedule for late January and February. There are now 2 public hearings required, so it'll be a little different at the end. So some of those dates are kind of in limbo, but it will be a longer budget process. And I'll get those out to the new council members as well, the calendars tomorrow.
Okay.
And then, and I'm sure some of you will miss those meetings. 'Cause I don't want one. And then Jim has an announcement on a street issue.
We got contacted kind of late by MP&W, but this isn't a street closure. They're going to partially close Mississippi Drive. They're going to start the process of taking the power lines down. I don't know any details of exactly what they are going to do, but I think it's, I should have brought the notes up here with me. I think it's on the 18th through the end of this month. There'll be partial closures of one half of Mississippi Drive, and there'll be flaggers there. They'll queue traffic up, let traffic clear one way, and then go the other way. So it's just an informational item, so that you know.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Pardon me? Yes.
Thank you. I know it's a bit after the fact, but I appreciate you letting me make a statement. I just want council to know that this has been an uncomfortable meeting. We all knew it would be, and it's going to get worse. But those of you who have elected not to review what has happened with an employee here have sent a clear message to every rental property owner and every contractor in this city that you do not care how they're treated. That is the problem. It was clear in what they were trying to add to the employee handbook. It is an adversarial relationship that exists between City Hall and the general public. We have been fighting this for a good 2 years. There are many of us experiencing this, and it should be a public-private partnership. It should be a partnership that works for the betterment of this community, and that is not happening. We are stonewalled We are given orders. It's a one-way street. You do it this way, or you can forget it. There are no accommodations made. There is no compromise. And that's why everybody was here tonight. People are angry. We've put up with it for long enough. You would not believe the hours I have put in reviewing code, asking questions, and getting stonewalled. And the hours I have put in reviewing inspections and asking questions and getting less than satisfactory answers. Telephones are not answered, emails are not returned promptly, and then when an inspection date passes, although we have made multiple phone calls, then we're penalized because we didn't get it scheduled, because our phones were not answered. And that's just a small example. I just want you to understand where you've left us. We have lost one of the most qualified individuals this city has ever had, who had the right attitude of working with the public, and he's been sacrificed. And I think everybody in this room who has rental property will rethink their profession. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Meeker. I have a few things that I'd like to share. There's an event going on 11:15 from 11 to 1 at the Merrill called Pink Heels, and it's going to be a celebration for all of the work that has been done to celebrate cancer awareness. I would like to invite everyone also to come down on Thursday, November 14th, to Pearl City Station. The Salvation Army is doing their kickoff. The honorary chairs this year are our safety chiefs. So Chief Evers, Chief Talkington, and Sheriff Ryan are the chairs for the Salvation Army Red Kettle campaign this year. I think it's a great idea. Our city guests this coming Tuesday are the Scouts, Boy Scouts, and Gene Pfeiffer with Muscatine Legal Services. The next Coffee with the Mayor is November 18th from 11:30 to 12:30 at Salvation Army. And once again, I'd like to ask everyone to remember to honor our veterans. And I thank you for coming tonight. I would also like to congratulate all of the people who won council seats and school board seats in the recent election. Thank all the community for voting. Thank you everyone who didn't win their seats but certainly raised their hand and said, I'm willing to serve my community. Shout out to everyone. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
We're adjourned.